All right. Good morning. I am so glad that you came to hear me speak this morning and hear about what I'm doing in my life.
Wait a minute. I'm here too.
I'm sorry. I'm glad. Charmaine is here. Going to be.
Wait, it's Sharmen.
Charmaine. Is that important?
It is important. Besides, we're here to tell them how to heal from narcissism, not show them a narcissist.
Okay. How about if I start again? Good morning. This is Sharmen.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm David Hawkins. We are so glad that you're with us. How many of you answer professional phone calls on your cell phone when you're not at work? Come on now, truthful, okay. Right. How many of you have taken office phone calls when you're out of office hours? Come on now, honest. All right. I took a phone call recently from a woman. I'm going to call her name Sharon, not her real name. And I was in the airport, actually. I took the phone call, and she was very, very distressed. And she shared the story of, she couldn't believe I took the phone call, first of all. And I said, it's okay. I'm in the airport waiting for a flight. It's okay. I can talk. She kept saying, are you sure you can talk? Are you sure? Yes, I can talk. And she started sharing her story about being in incredible distress in a destructive marriage with a narcissistic man. At least she described him as narcissistic. And she just wasn't sure what to do. And I was talking her through some possibilities. And the phone went dead. And I thought, I dropped the call. And I looked at my phone. No, the call was still going through. And then I heard her sobbing. Now, why was she crying? So I took a moment. I let her collect herself. And she just shared more about her story, about, she feels so incredibly alone. And here was a soothing voice. You've all done that. That's what you do. You offer a lifeline to people, and it's an incredible lifeline that you offer. And you offer hope, and that's what I offered. I didn't offer her very much. It was a 5-minute phone call. I referred her to one of our team members, probably Sharmen. She's working with a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse. But she was so incredibly grateful. She couldn't believe that I would take that kind of time. Have you had those kind of phone calls where you just offer just a dollop of hope and understanding, and they just absorb it and take it in? So it was a wonderful phone call, and I was sincere, and I care. And there are so many hurting people out there, especially as it pertains to narcissism and emotional abuse. And we'll talk about what the overlap is and how to differentiate and what we're going to do in that kind of situation. So here are some questions that we're going to answer today. We're going to answer the question, who are some of these people who make women like Sharon sob at the hearing of a reassuring voice? Who are they? Who are the men that we label narcissists? We'll talk about that. Who are the women who fall in love with these men? And what happens to these women over time? And by the way, we're discovering more and more about what happens to them over time. I'm in the process of doing some research about that, about what happens physiologically, right? Because the body keeps score. And what is it like to experience narcissistic victim syndrome? And Sharman's going to talk at length about that. So there is an abundance of information and misinformation on the topic of narcissism. How many of you have gone out and looked at some of the information out there? I'm going to be referring to a little bit. How many have gone out? Okay. So you're going to like some of what I say, and you're not going to like some of what I say. But please like me, because I have a little bit, just a touch of narcissism in me. All right. So we're going to talk about narcissistic personality disorder. And we're going to figure out, okay, what is it exactly, and what do we do with it, and are we really labeling people correctly, are we not, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, there is, in my opinion, far too many people being given the diagnosis of NPD. So let me give you a stat about that you may or may not know. Actually, I had a gentleman come up and probably is going to correct me on that stat. Don't do it publicly, okay, sir? Daryl? You can do it publicly, actually. That'd be okay. So the current research is that it really is actually a fairly rare disorder, 1 in 16. I don't know how rare that is. That's enough for me. But 1 in 16 out of a population of 35,000 people, 1 in 16 experienced the symptoms of NPD. Now, interestingly, 3% of the people over 65, what do you think the number was for millennials? Yeah, you got it. So 10% of millennials in this age of Instagram, Facebook, and so on and so forth. So the look at me syndrome. All right, so while a formal diagnosis of NPD may be rare, narcissistic traits, and I don't know if I'm the only one talking about this, but I talk about the spectrum. And if you've read any of my stuff, I talk about a spectrum. So that's one of the problems, I think, is that we talk about either you have it or you don't. Well, not so much. Bell-shaped curve. So we have all this conflicting information out on the internet, and please don't throw anything at me. There's a lot of emotion out there. Have you noticed that? There's just a lot of emotion. I couldn't believe it when I started doing a few videos and things. Boy, I would get some people who would just champion me and some people who wanted my license. Like, is it so it's a thank you for showing up. It's a loaded topic. All right. So let me remind you, so here are the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. I am not saying it's not out there. We'll stop with that. All right. They must have at least 5 of the following criteria. You know these. They must exhibit an exaggerated sense of self-importance, a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, and ideal love. They must believe that they are special and can only be understood by or associate with other special people and high-status people. They require excessive admiration. They have a sense of entitlement. They selfishly take advantage of others to achieve their own ends. They lack empathy. And they are often envious of others or believe that others are envious of them. And they show arrogant, haughty, patronizing, or contemptuous behaviors or attitudes. Okay, 5 of the following they've got to have. So now, interestingly, and some of you researchers could critique this because this is a little bit old, but the American Psychological Association, I don't think they have reversed their position. And they say this: if NPD is caused by infantile damage and consequent developmental short circuits, it probably represents an irremediable condition. However, if narcissism is a behavior pattern that's learned, then there is some hope, however tenuous, that it's a behavior pattern that can be unlearned. So again, let's recap. A formal diagnosis is probably not as prevalent as we've been saying. And I know I'm stepping on some toes here, and there's lots of women, wives, pastors, and so on, and therapists that are saying, NPD. Well, I'm going to just ask us to be careful and hear us out before you throw anything at me. Okay, let me finish. Fair enough? Thank you.
Actually, no.
All right. So, narcissism is not a new topic. It's been around for a long, long time. I'll remind you of a couple of biblical characters. One, remember good old Haman? How many remember Haman? Book of Esther? Boy, oh boy. Troubled individual. powerful man, smooth talker, lots of control and power, and smooth enough talker that he talks the king into, letting him be the number one guy. But then you know that he's got a plot within a plot, right, to annihilate the Jews. And man alive, this guy is scary when you read about him. So if you're ever wondering, like, okay, what does the true narcissist look like? If you're on his good side, you're going to rise up, you're going to do fine. You're on his bad side, and Haman is going to do some bad things to you. Now, Haman was married. What do you think about that? Zeresh. So Zeresh, can you just imagine? I'm filling in the details. I'm imagining that she fell in love with his charm, his power. He had plenty of money, plenty of power. He had plenty of everything. But it wasn't enough. Wasn't enough. He needed more, insatiable. So Zeresh probably, again, I'm kind of filling in the blanks. I can imagine her falling in love with him, as women do. I can imagine her being connected with him, as women are. I can imagine her having a relationship with him, as women do. And then she tries to talk him out. She finds out about his diabolical plot, tries to talk him out of it. Not going to happen. And then the end comes to Haman. And we don't know what happens to Zeresh, but we can imagine, like the women that that Sharmen's going to be talking to you about, undoubtedly she had to suffer. Undoubtedly. All right, I want to give you a present day drama. This story is, I receive calls every day. 3, 4, 5 calls that I receive, and my office receives, Sharmen receives them. So we're receiving calls all the time. So I'm going to call this woman Susan. Susan's 46 years old, divorced mother of 2. She's re-entered the dating scene. Now you know where this story is going, unfortunately. Can't fault her. She enters the dating scene. She meets Jeff. Jeff is active in the singles ministry. So is she. And they have a wonderful, strong, immediate connection. They promise to take things slow. Thank you. Thank you. They promise to take things slow. Haven't you heard that before? Kind of like, anymore I just tell people, don't just, tell me when it's done. Tell me when you're, don't, I'm not going to counsel you to, they know it anyway. So Jeff, they didn't take it slow. 3 months later, Jeff asks her to be engaged and to marry. She says yes, against her best judgment. Okay. So the honeymoon is on, and then Susan comes and she makes a phone call to me sometime later. What did I get myself into? I feel like such a fool. She feels alone. Please remember that word, alone. Alone, alone, alone. Because when she talks to her friends, they're either going to tell her 2 extreme things, and I want you to remember this point. They're going to tell her, run, get out. Or they're going to tell her, you've got to stay. Stay and pray. Stay and pray or run for the hills. And her brain, I don't know, is Dr. Amen in the house? What happens to the brain? It's called cognitive dissonance, by the way. We're not going to talk about that, but real quick, like cognitive dissonance. Everybody know what that is? These conflicting things in the brain. Stay and pray. Yeah, that sounds good. Run for the hills. Yeah, that sounds right. Run, stay, pray, blah. So, Susan is in trouble, and Susan is in love, and Susan is swept off her feet by a wonderful man who is wonderful. So, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Right? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is wonderful. So, he's wonderful to a certain group of people and not so wonderful to her. And Sharmen will talk about this, she is trying desperately to regain her emotional footing. But again, remember the brain fog, the clamoring, stay and pray. Yeah, that sounds right. Run. That's what my sister says, run. Okay, that sounds right. Okay. So please remember that. All right. So narcissism causes problems in a relationship We're quick to call it a character defect. We're quick to call it a personality disorder. We're quick to call it thinking errors. It is all of that. They are character disorders. The narcissist will use a myriad of defenses to guard against feeling healthy shame. I'm going to talk about that a little later. But it is more than that. It is sin. We don't like to use that word, but it is sin. It is sin. Now, how can I make that claim? You're familiar with a narcissist named Paul, at least a former narcissist. And Paul said these words, by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think with sober judgment. 1 Peter says to be sober-minded. Narcissistically and emotionally abusive men are not sober-minded. They are not sober judgment. Solomon, smartest guy around, says this about the narcissist. In Proverbs 21:24, the proud and the arrogant person, mocker is his name. He behaves with insolent fury. Right? Insolent fury. He gets his feathers ruffled, and then he goes at the person, and so on. And then Jesus said, of course, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be the greatest among you will be a servant to all. So we know what Scripture says. So it is sin. So I want to talk about what causes this entitlement, arrogant, and narcissistic behavior. And I was kind of surprised to find this data, but this is the latest, greatest research that I have about what causes narcissism. And in this book by Jean Twenge and Keith Campbell called The Narcissism Epidemic, Living in an Age of Entitlement, they say there are 4 causal factors for narcissism. One is parenting. All of these kind of make sense. Actually, the last one surprised me. I'll get to that one. Okay, parenting. In an attempt to raise kids with self-esteem, we tell them they can do anything, they can become anything, they are everything, and we center our lives around them. More or less, don't we? Can you see that? Can you see parents who raise kids that become very self-centered? How about the celebrity culture? Yeah, we live in this celebrity culture where you are important. The Real Housewives of New York, other TV reality shows that are just filled with narcissism and self-promotion. Self-promotion. And then the media and the internet. So look at me, look at what I had for lunch today. I want to show you. We can laugh about that. We've all done it, right? We've all said, look, I'm at the zoo with my whoever. Okay. And then easy credit. They found that easy credit. You can get whatever you want. You can live higher than you want to live. You can be whoever you want to be, and you don't have to pay for it. Except at some point you do have to pay for it, of course. All right. So now that I've presented this dire position here, except for what the APA says, if you watch any of the videos out there, and I'm guilty of, if you've watched, I've made a bunch of videos. I'm guilty. I got addicted. I don't know. I'm trying to recover, but I apologize. But if you get out there and you see my videos, you're going to see these other people's videos and then these other people's videos, and you're going to see some really, 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 in my opinion, wild information. I'm going to read you the wild information. I'll let you think for yourself about this. You do not have to look far for this information. So if you read the print, you're going to see that they're going to say, run, run, run. Get out. Get out now while you're still alive before they suck the life out of you. How many of you have seen something like that? Run. Okay, if you haven't seen it, okay. This I just grabbed this. This is a random 5 things you should know about the narcissist. And I would just ask you to ask yourself, is this really true? Is it really true? Number 1, the narcissist will always use you. Always. Is that really true? Or is it the spectrum? What's true? Number 2, the relationship with the narcissist will never be equal. They are incapable. They cannot have an equal relationship. Is that really true? Number 3, everything the narcissist says is a lie. I'm reading this, folks, so it's true. I'm not making this up. Everything the narcissist says is a lie, a manipulation, and a scam. Everything. Is that really true? Number 4, the narcissist will never change and they will never stop abusing you. That's the deal. End of story. And number 5, the narcissist is incapable of loving you. So, you can think that over. Is that true, or are there pieces of truth to it? And what's true? What's true? You're probably hoping I'm going to shed some light on what's true, but all right. So I want you to remember a few things. Remember that not all narcissistic men have NPD. It's a spectrum, according to me. I've seen about 7,000 to 10,000 men and women. So the only advantage I can think of for getting older, it's the only advantage I can think of, is that now I can say I've seen 10,000 narcissistic men. There must be some other advantage I will discover, I hope. So remember, not all narcissistic men have NPD. Remember, not all narcissistic men are untreatable. Some of you are going to say, oh, wait a second now. Remember, many women are truly connected to this narcissistic man. So, I mean, even if we were to say, get out, they're not going to get out. They're not going to do it. So we're just setting up this conflict. And I think we even need to be careful in giving that advice anyway. Remember, marriage can be, I'm going to get something thrown at me on this one. I just know it. Marriage can be a wonderful place, stand aside, can be a wonderful place to be shaped into the person God wants us to be. Is it possible that marriage could somehow be, if she is safe, can it be a crucible? Can it be a container for work? Remember, God is able to change hearts. Ask the Apostle Paul. And then finally, remember, you have the opportunity, and dare I say the responsibility, to respond different than secular culture. All right. Now, certainly, I think this is going to save me for anything that I just said. Certainly, we do not encourage any woman to stay in an abusive situation. Okay. That just goes without saying. Sharmen's got some really strong words to say about that, which I support totally. We must be wise in how we approach this problem. Can narcissistic men be helped, or should we counsel women caught in the throes of narcissistic abuse to run, not walk away from their man? What do we do? As for me, the matter is incredibly complex and no doubt controversial. So, what I find in my intensive and extensive work with narcissistic and emotionally abusive men is that the problem falls on a spectrum. I have fired some men from my practice because they were just untreatable. And I didn't have the emotional stamina to I didn't want to do it. I'm too old. They didn't bring enough to the table. So there's been some, but most I end up working with, and we'll talk about that. All right. So It's a spectrum. Not all men have NPD. Many have NPD in varying degrees of severity. So when I'm asked if those on the spectrum, if they are treatable, I have one answer. I don't know. I think it's a good answer. I don't know. However, I don't stop there. I have a list of questions that I ask and that you can see. And I would suggest to you, by the way, when we're done, please come and tell me if you think there's some additional really good questions. I'm very, very open to that. We're going to have questions at the end, by the way, saving time. Number one, has any significant effort been made to intervene with the narcissistic men? Most haven't. Most have not had any kind of intervention because they don't know what to do. And we as clinicians often don't know what to do. And I'm just now, as I'm getting older, starting to figure out what do those interventions look like. Daryl, you're going to talk to me afterwards, and this guy's an authority too. Help me figure out what does an intervention look like. Number two, if there has been an intervention, what did that look like? What effort was made? Number three, how successful was the intervention, and how was the narcissist held accountable for character change? Accountability. They have very little accountability. If there was significant intervention with professional treatment of the narcissist that included strict accountability, what was the outcome? That's going to tell me a lot. Did she leave him? Was there a therapeutic separation that was managed and monitored by the therapist, by the pastor, by whomever? What happened? Was he put into a treatment program? What treatment program? There's no treatment program technically at this point. Was he referred to a therapist that knows about narcissism and emotional abuse? What happened? If no significant intervention has been done to date, is the woman willing to initiate an intervention? Will she have the necessary support if she does so? Will she? Maybe. What did I hear? Okay, yes, no, maybe so. After the intervention, will both she and he be involved in depth counseling? This emotionally abusive, character disordered, sinful problem is very, very, very complex and entrenched and embedded in the personality. It will not go away with a little of this or a little of that. Okay. After the intervention, will they both be involved in depth counseling involving individual, group, and couples counseling at the appropriate time? Couples counseling at the appropriate time. Please, everybody hear me. I know that's a very, very, very controversial topic. All right. So there's no doubt that some of you will be critical of these questions, critical of what I'm saying, and that's okay. We're just trying to figure this out. Is it really fair to ask the victim of abuse to initiate an intervention of her mate? She's exhausted. She can't think straight. I'm just starting writing a book on the physiological impact of relationship stress and emotional abuse. I would say this is a very informal stat. This is my stat of 10,000 women. 90% have physiological issues, autoimmune disorders, headache, migraine, anxiety, depression, and so on. How many of you are seeing that? Rampant, epidemic, absolutely epidemic. All right. If there is hope to be offered the partner, is there hope to be offered the partner of someone with narcissistic traits? The intervention that I'm talking about will bring clarity to the diagnosis as well as the prognosis. All right, finally, and then we're going to have Sharmen speak here. The change process. So what does an intervention look like? An intervention must occur where the narcissist is threatened with losing their mate. They may, in fact, need to lose their mate for a time, and Sharmen's going to talk about that. They got to have the breakdown that leads to the breakthrough. And when they don't have the breakdown, they're going to stay completely enmeshed in their defense processes, their self-protection, which keeps them safe and maintains their distorted, entitled, self-aggrandized thinking, and so on. So there's got to be some kind of decisive intervention. Number 2, the intervention must include significant confrontation of those character traits and their dysfunctional thinking and their attitudes and their heart. Their heart. I have so many women telling me, well, you know, he's been willing to read Lundy Bancroft's book, so he read half. Well, he didn't really read half of it. He read a little part of it. And, he went for 3 counseling sessions, and he says he's sorry. And he wonders how many times he's got to say that. Did you catch that? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So his heart's got to change. And we can make it happen. No, that's not always true. But we do have tools. All right, the intervention must lead to a breakdown that leads to a breakthrough, leading to a brokenness that includes healing of the self-concept, the sinful nature that is promoted attitude of self-aggrandizement. Number 4, the intervention must include healing for the victim of the narcissist with new and healthy boundaries. Boundaries doesn't exist in this relationship. He's a boundary breaker and she struggles in making boundaries. That will reinforce ongoing change, and there must be long-term sustained counseling with accountability for change. I've got guys coming for 4-day intensives with me, then they do a 2-day personal intensive, then they're involved in Celebrate Recovery, then they're involved in our ongoing men's group, and that's not enough. That's not enough. So I don't know where we're going in the next year, but all right, so yes, this is deep character change, not easily or quickly done, but it is possible, and I believe we're on the cutting edge of how to bring change and hope to narcissistic men and the women who love them. I'm going to now turn it over to Sharmen, who's going to talk to us about women and how to work with women.
If any of you came in late, you can download our PowerPoint at marriagerecoverycenter.com/AACC. Just letting you know that. And also, I'm going to talk really fast because I have a lot of content to cover in 30 minutes. But I do have my full notes available for download as well, and I'll have a link at the end of this that you can just get on the Marriage Recovery Center website and download that for your future reference. So, I grew up on a 100-acre farm where I learned to simplify, get to the root, make do, and make it work. And I carry that same mentality to my work with women as well. I wade through all the muck and mess and get to the root of the issue. And while psycho labels and terminology are important and helpful, more often than not, they name the weed and not the root. So, this is my slogan that I start with. Bad behavior is the issue. Bad behavior is bad behavior no matter what you label it. It disables the ability to connect. It devastates relationships. And I would say it obliterates the reflection of God, which is our whole point, our whole mission of walking as Christians is to be a reflection of God. Bad behavior really messes that up. So I have a whole toolbox, just a few basics for helping you bring healing to that relationship, although I would say these are common for bringing health to any relationship. They can be, sorry, this is the wrong slide. Oh no, that's right. They can be modified for the person trying to go no contact, or for the woman who is trying to stay well in the relationship that she's in. Although, like Dr. Hawkins said, I would contend that it is most helpful, most often, to have at least a season of no contact, because that's usually what it takes to catalyze the abuser's internal motivation to change. So the first one, mind your own business. This probably doesn't mean what you think it means. I wouldn't be telling her to shut up or to just disengage from this relationship or, to even just live and let live. And I certainly wouldn't be telling her just to pray more and wait for God to step in. Instead, this is a way of paying attention to who is talking about who. Because, honestly, where real change happens, where the rubber meets the road, is in taking responsibility for our own stuff. And how they talk to each other and about each other really represents their assumed level of responsibility. She comes to sessions usually saying things like, what can I change to make him stop? Whereas he comes to session saying things like, how can I make her stop? You see the difference? In a sense, she knows that change starts with her. While she probably still has some very codependent thinking about what those changes are, she comes to the sessions looking at herself, how depressed or anxious or crazy or numb or frightened she feels. And she's the one who's done all the research. She's read all the books. She's scoured the internet. She's made all the counseling appointments, right? So, even if she's talking about her husband's behavior, it's still in the context of what she can change to be better, sexier, a better housekeeper, more fun, a better listener, whatever. The emotional abuser, on the other hand, is all about fixing her. You'll hear it in the terms he uses where he places responsibility and how he talks about himself. He'll minimize his behavior and highlight hers. Or he'll talk about his feelings but her behavior, totally dismissing the disconnect there. When he does talk about her thinking, her feelings, her thoughts, it's always in the context of his perception and definition of them. It's never about understanding her. So some examples of what he might say are things like, I didn't do something I should have because she didn't want me to. Or she's always trying to make me. Or even using the excuse of, I'll never be good enough for her, so why should I bother? So all of those are examples of him speaking for her, totally deflecting his responsibility for his own actions. So significant amounts of crazy making happen in those circular conversations where we evaluate and label the other person's thoughts, feelings, and actions. So this actually immediately puts them all on the defensive so that nobody listens and nothing gets resolved. It's just a courtroom, defensiveness. They both mislabel and misrepresent each other, which is easy enough for any of us to do, but nothing ever really gets solved in that space where they're speaking for each other. So I say, help her find her voice by giving her room to speak for herself. Because another thing that happens is, the abuser uses this to keep his spouse off kilter and unable to speak. Right? That's a way of powering over her where she has no voice. So help her find her voice. She has a right to say, can I speak for myself, please? Let her use her own words to talk about her experience. And when she does this, she actually begins to break her spouse's definition of her because it's her, trying to stand up for herself. When she has to put into her own words what she's thinking and what she's feeling and what her motives are, it gives her that footing where she's not just reflecting what he has said of her. And it gives her a chance to learn how to walk in her own personal autonomy, to take some responsibility for her own choices. So, it stops the crazy making by having each person focus on their own stuff, minding their own business. So, if the other person refuses to hear, that's on him. I think that gives her a really good opportunity to see what he's really made of. Is he really willing to change based on his response? So it helps her to know what her next step is going to be and shows her where to put boundaries in place so that she's not just re-engaging in the toxicity. So the next one, the dead heart conundrum. I tried to name these in a way that you would remember, what they are. Not that you will, but It's my sense of humor. The consequence of behavior that destroys a relationship is that there is no relationship, right? Her heart has been powered over and broken so much it is numb and dead. There is no relationship. So this tool actually focuses on two elements of this, both her inability to stand up for herself, to guard her own heart, and her dread and fear of her husband. So she may have spent so many years having been told or implied to her that she's stupid. She's oversensitive, overreactive, over-emotional, and nothing about her core personhood is worth listening to or caring about. She's been gaslighted for so long she doesn't trust her own perceptions or memories, which means she's been taught to fiercely ignore her own gut feelings and intuition, which is dangerous to ask that of a woman. Every conversation feels like another expose on how immature or selfish or disrespectful he thinks she is. He's been an expert at hooking her into the fight, only to heap on more brokenness and then to blame her for it and demand she fix what he broke. And then he demands sexual intimacy as if that will fix everything. But to her, there is nothing intimate or loving about that. So helping bring new life to her heart entails validating her experience and helping her to move through it in a way that she can walk well in the space that she's in. She needs to know that her thoughts are her own. Her feelings, her hopes, her dreams, her perceptions, they are her own, and they are valid simply for that. So she needs to hear you say, "That did hurt. And I believe you," because her experience is real, no matter what her husband says about it. Her experience is real for how she's experienced it, her perception of it. So she needs to hear you say, what you've endured has absolutely been devastating or painful or frightening or sinful against you, whatever it is. All that mess going on in her heart is real. It's not imagined. It's not exaggerated. It might not necessarily be truth, because that's something you have to untangle in the healing. But it is real, no matter what anyone else says. So it's telling her something important. If she can learn to listen to it, it will tell her what she's longing for, what she's afraid of. It'll help her deal with the grief. It'll help her move through that. So, we're going to help her to move through that so that she gets to a place where she can start to trust herself again, trust her heart, to guard her own heart and walk through this well. So the other element of this was her dread, her fear towards her husband. And, it's very normal for her to have a dead heart towards her husband. He has just beaten her down so much that it's normal for her to be ambivalent even about reconciling. Even if he changes, even if he repents or changes, it's normal to not want that. And so I always tell people that that's a very real consequence for how he has treated her heart. And so I try not to heap more harm on her by telling her, well, if he repents, if he changes, you have to reconcile in this relationship. Because in actuality, you have to really start first with developing trustworthiness, not just trustworthiness and safety in that relationship before you can even start to talk about reconciliation. That's a natural consequence of sin against her. And God doesn't necessarily take away our consequences for our sin just because we repent and change. So that's an important concept to keep in mind. God can restore her heart towards her husband, but that may not happen. And it will not happen without her husband making very real, lasting behavioral changes that start with a heart transformed by God. Even if he does, the consequences of his sin may very well be permanent death of her heart toward him. Which means, ultimately, for both of them, healing comes from putting their eyes on God, letting God be their God, not the relationship, letting him walk them through this place surrendered to Him to bring hope and healing. Restoration of their hearts may not mean reconciliation of the marriage. And I think that's an important thing. And I know I'm probably stepping on toes because so many churches harp on that, but just know that. Restoration, her wholeness and healing, and his wholeness and healing do not depend on the reconciliation of the marriage, although that is our goal. A practical assignment that I give to help them move through this stage is to just walk through this simple healing model. I actually have them journal this as a journal assignment, but simple healing model. I did make a slide for this. So it's simple. Name what she feels, name what she's lost, name how she's been changed, and then based on her future hopes and dreams, again, getting back to truth, what God says of her, that kind of thing, where does she go from here? It's to name what she feels, identify what she's lost in this experience, evaluate how she's been changed, and based upon her future hopes and dreams, identify where to go from here. So, this can actually be used for any of the emotions that she's experiencing in here. If it's loss or grief or abandonment or fear or anger or whatever, she can walk through this, naming that feeling and then talking about what has she lost that has caused that. And then how has this changed her? For better or worse. It might have made her stronger. It might have taken away her voice. There's all kinds of ways you can look at this. But this has changed her. And if she can see what that is, then she can move into the fourth step based on her future hopes and dreams, because this is her getting her footing. She knows who she is. She knows how she's been changed. She knows where she wants to go from here. So how do we lay that out? It kind of takes what's behind, the mess behind, turns it all to forward motion, forward-facing motion. Where do you go from here? Untangle the trauma bond. There comes a point where it is exceedingly less frightening to go along with what the abuser says of her than it is to try to defend herself and fight against it. She simply doesn't have the wherewithal to defend against the powering over behavior. Her silence is also tied into her sense of morality if she's been taught that being a godly woman means being submissive to her husband's authority no matter what it looks like. In other words, she's come to believe that she must keep herself under his authority and that going against it is disrespectful and dishonoring both to her husband and to God, even when his behavior is sin. She's probably so emotionally dependent upon him to control the relationship that she expects him to alleviate the very harm he uses to control her. Meaning, she believes that he alone has the power to stop the abuse against her, and she thinks that if she just hangs out long enough, they'll actually get through this and grow together. The little intermittent rewards that she gets, those moments of good or the sweet moments, the love bombing, that kind of thing actually keeps her hooked into the destructiveness in a way that makes it act like an addiction. And the result is she gives up her own power to step out of the chaos and returns again and again to his destructive behavior. So I recommend a season of no contact if at all possible. This is probably the most effective way for her to have the space necessary to heal. It allows her just some peace for her emotional level to come down to a normal level where she can think more clearly, engage more wisely, and hold to her boundaries more consistently. It also sends the message that she is not willing to engage in this relationship any longer as is, that there must be significant change. So no contact means don't engage in anything beyond the logistics, like if there's child care you have to deal with or finances or whatever, nothing else. It may mean blocking his emails, his texts, his phone, Facebook, whatever, if he continues to use that as a means to control or to keep her hooked into the nonsense. If it's about blaming or begging or blame shifting or hooking her in or love bombing, any of that stuff that keeps her hooked into the nonsense and feeds feeds him, and doesn't allow her to heal. So just block all of that. Do not respond to any attempt to re-engage in the nonsense. This includes, and this is a big one because this is a big hook. We want justice. So this includes not defending herself or explaining herself to him because he doesn't want to hear. He doesn't want to understand. He doesn't want to fix his behavior. He's just interested in keeping her hooked into the fight. Note that this is not a way to build a relationship. So if you're working on reconciling, this is not a way to do it. It's just a good way of helping her to maintain that safe space that she needs. So I teach people a method called the gray rock. If you Google that, there's actually all kinds of content about it. But being a gray rock, yes. So if you go outside and look around, a gray rock is not going to catch your attention, right? It's just boring. It's just sitting there taking up space. So this is a good word picture to help her maintain emotional safety. To be as boring, as unshiny, as uninteresting as possible in her responses to him without giving him anything to hook onto for the fight. Be kind and gracious. Walk in who you know you want to be. But keep totally detached from the power games. Just stay out of the power games. Nothing sticks to a gray rock either, not even duct, although my boys correct me on this, but I don't think duct tape even sticks to a gray rock. So the idea there is that nothing sticks to her too. So he's lobbing all this stuff at her, these definitions of her, accusations, blame, and all of that stuff. Teach her not to even let any of that stick to her. Don't let any of it land in her heart. Because I will guarantee you none of it is truth. None of it is truth. And she is trying to learn to walk in truth. So again, this is not a way to build a relationship, but it is a way to maintain some safety, emotional safety, so that she can begin to think clearly again and regain her core sense of self until, if and when, he ends his destructive ways. This is hopefully short term. Hopefully it won't take him too long to figure out that what he's always done isn't going to work anymore. And if it is, and you get a chance to work with them together, this is a good place to walk them through. Dr. Hawkins has a method he calls the therapeutic healing process. It's a process of working through the issues, getting through some of the mess without the pressure of reconciling. It's just working through the issues so that they can come to a place of emotional stability for both of them. It's important to note that attachment is something God created. It is normal to be bonded. It takes a great deal of pain to unone what God has won. I know that's not a word. She still needs to discern what it is she's bonded to. Is it the hope of what she thought she saw in him or what she thought things would be? Is it just the good moments she's holding on to, waiting for that next reward? Is she really looking at the marriage as it really is? Is it a love-based bond or a fear-based? Is she able to recognize the abuse, or does she continually subject herself to it and cannot fathom a way out? I usually say here, this is a really good place to identify, has she made marriage, the relationship, her God? Is that what she's bonded to? Is this getting all her hopes and her dreams and her meaning from this marriage? And if so, she needs to break from that because God's not going to let her make that be her God. But that's where healing's going to come in as well. So loneliness may be the greatest battle she'll ever face. That's going to be the battle that she's going to have to face in order to find healing and wholeness, because that's where she goes to God for her filling. When she's lonely, right? It starts to break that addiction. So Breaking Bad. This is about breaking the false agreements and the unjust blame on her. So many of my clients start their story by saying, it has taken me a year or more to talk about this. I am so ashamed of letting myself stay in this abuse for so long. As she describes the hell she's been living in, I keep hearing the same theme repeated. I should have seen. I should have stopped it. I should have been better, sexier, more fun, a better housekeeper, more submissive, more respectful. If I had just done it differently, I could have stopped this. The thing is, she couldn't have stopped it because she's not the one who controls his behavior. He is responsible for his own behavior. Don't imply that she could have done more to appease him, or should have seen the red flags a long time ago, or should have known better, or that she did something to cause this. She already feels overly burdened by shame, and not a day goes by that her husband isn't blaming her. So don't heap further harm on her. I know she's not here because she speaks in pink and he speaks in blue. She's not here because she doesn't know how to compromise or relate well. She is here because she's being abused. And that is a very different mindset than someone who simply doesn't know how to compromise or say what she needs to say, right? The thing is, it's never okay to power over another person. Like I said, bad behavior is bad behavior. Her spouse chooses to mistreat her out of his own free will. She doesn't make him do anything. So I know she feels like it's her responsibility. She does feel the shame of not stopping it. She is embarrassed to tell people what she's endured and what she's seen herself do in the middle of it, her own behavior in the middle of it. She would never have chosen to settle for this if she had seen it coming. So in actuality, her resilience, her long suffering has been one of her greatest strengths. Probably what kept her in the relationship for too long. Because she expected difficulty. She expected that they would figure this out and get through it. And those may actually be the same strengths that she will need to draw upon as she learns to walk well in this and heal, especially as she starts to see in greater clarity who she really is according to God and what He says of her. Again, her story is what it is, shame and pain and all, but help her see that that shame doesn't have to keep her from taking the next step. Help her break the bad out of her heart. And by that I mean the false agreements, the negative accusatory scripts that constantly inform her thinking. Get her back to truth. Ultimately, this means the truth of who God is, what He's done for her, what He speaks over her, truth from God's perspective, not her husband's. She has intrinsic value as an individual, unique person with her own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, just because that's how God has created her. But her husband has acted as if he is God, able to read her mind, know her better than herself, determine what is best for her, her course of life, define her dreams and ambitions. I'd even venture to say that the church has encouraged him in this role. The reality is he has no power or authority given by God to do that. The only power that he has over her is the power that she allows him. So let's teach her to take back her own power by helping her to build her own core sense of self, so that she can be who God has called her to be, who He has designed her to be. I don't have a name for this exercise yet, but what I have my ladies do to help them kind of frame who they are is to just write out a list of the character qualities they want to be known for. You know, I always tell people I want to be known for being courageous and having integrity. You know, start with that. Just who does she want to be known for? You can have her, look around at movie stars or book characters that she admires. That might help her decide what characters she likes. Some people start with Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit, or the love chapter is some qualities. But what that does is it gives her a grid through which to filter everything that comes across her day. So when she knows this is the person that she's working to become, whatever is brought across her path that day, she will decide what to do based on where she is going, which is a key component in helping her redevelop her core sense of self. The biggest hurdle will be overcoming her sense of not even being worth the effort. So part of your job is going to be encouraging her just to understand that she is worth the effort. So get your spirituality dirty. This is where I get to step on toes today. This tool is really for you as counselors. It is way too common for those of us in a Christian environment to send her the message that being a godly wife looks like enduring more, praying more, and waiting for God to step in to convict her husband. Meaning, since she is not the Holy Spirit, that it is not her job to speak up against the sin against her, and that her only recourse is to be a quiet and gentle spirit who doesn't say anything, doesn't rock the boat, doesn't insist that he treat her differently. That is spiritual abuse on the church's part. Yeah. To perpetuate, thank you, to perpetuate the idea that being a godly submissive woman means taking on whatever abuse our husbands and churches have yet to be convicted about. Jesus never once enabled sin. He never put up with abuse, except when it was time for him to die on the cross. But that was his mission, to die for people's sin. It is not our mission. Our mission is to be a light against the darkness. Now, marriage is not exempt from the other rules of engagement that the Bible lays out for relationships. So God has a vested interest in this marriage being a picture of him to the world. While this relationship is messy and insidious and sinful, it is the church's job to shine the light of Christ all over it. Not to protect themselves from getting into the fray by minimizing the harm or covering it up or giving churchy platitudes about God's ability to step in and save her, or to even harp on how much God hates divorce. You know, on that note, what else does God hate? The Bible lists several things. From Proverbs 6:16 to 19, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush to evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. From Psalm 11:5, the Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked, those who love violence, he hates with a passion. From Isaiah 61:8, for I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. A lying tongue, hypocrisy, arrogance, stirring up strife, robbery, wrongdoing, violence. What do you think comes first? The divorce? Or the robbing, the robbery, the wrongdoing, the stirring up violence? So the question I ask is this: how does this behavior, this attitude, or this marriage reflect God? How can you fit coercion and control into a biblical picture of God's love? You can't. Jesus never exploited his power to control others. It was always about an invitation to love and to do life together. What would he think about us exploiting Scripture to control others? We have big time blame shifted by focusing on a wife's level of submission without pointing a finger at the husband's abuse for what it really is. You know? Technically, good leadership means leading in such a way people want to follow, correct? Submission is a byproduct of that. It is not the driving force. So God cares more about this relationship and how it represents him than a piece of paper from a judge. In fact, God granted a writ of divorce because of men's hearts, hardened hearts, who were defying his picture of marriage, messing up his image to the world. So a simple, basic, hardcore guide for helping a husband learn to lead is to have him sit, to marinate in the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with every dimension of yourself, and then to love others. There is no entitlement in that. There's nothing that talks about what he'll get. Like if he does X, he'll get Y, or that he's owed Y, even if he doesn't do anything. It's about God being enough in him so that he can love and cherish his wife the way God created him to. Which is a very different picture than what we teach, which might be different than what you've taught. But it's a good place to start to redeem the time.
All right.
Thank you. Oh, this is
Isn't that good stuff? All right, I'm going to just present a couple things very quickly, and then we're going to open things up for questions. So what about a toolbox for men? What about these narcissistic men? I listened to 10,000 women, and here are the themes. This is not comprehensive, folks. These are just the themes that I kept hearing again and again and again. I'm going to go through them rather quickly, but it's just these are the stories that I just heard again and again and again. So she said to me, what I want him to know is I want him to know that I'm a separate person with my separate values, with my separate beliefs. I want to be seen something other than a cardboard cutout of a person, a projection of what he wants. I want to be known. I want him to care about who I am. And so I work with men on this. Number 2, sit with your shame. Sit with it. It's okay. You don't have to defend yourself. It's okay to feel inadequate. It's okay to feel healthy shame. Healthy shame, not toxic. Healthy shame. Healthy remorse. It's okay. They can't do that. They can't stand it. It's terrible. It's very, very hard for men to sit with this sense of remorse and inadequacy, but they can do it. They can be taught to do it. Please, they say to me, help him sit with this shame and remorse. Number 3, it's not all about you. It's not all about you. Come on. Include me in this relationship. Create room in this coupleship, okay? Let's dance together. So it's not all about you. While the criticism may feel personal and while it may hurt, think about it. Consider it. Reflect on it. Reflect on what I'm saying. Number 4, you created this mess. You created this situation. These men feel so sorry for themselves. I can't believe this is happening and I'm now changing and she ought to... No, you created this situation. You were largely responsible. Largely, not totally, but largely responsible for what we are sitting with today. It's not a 50-50 deal. Get that out of your head. I have to say that to these men during my men's intensives again and again and again. Come on, work on you. Stay on your side of the street. Number 5, her anger is a cry for help. Look on it as that. If she's angry with you, you better be thankful. You better be thankful that she still has some feelings. Man alive, what's the opposite of love is not anger, it's indifference. If she's angry with you, man, get on your knees and say, thank you, Lord. She still has some... What's the saying? I wouldn't hate you so much if I didn't love you so much. Okay. Number 6. Consider the worst possible outcome. She wants him to know, look, if you don't change, it really is going to end bad. No, it's not. No, it can't. She's not going to... Yes, she is going to... As Sharmen said, she's going to run out of gas. She really is. And when she's out of gas, she is out of gas. So you better be thinking about this. Look at the end. Denial says no. Don't even notice I am lying to myself, right? Well, think about it. Number 7. Boy, they have a hard time with this one. She's probably right and she can be trusted. And when I look at the man and I say, think about it for a second. Do you really think she would steer you wrong? She's saying, go to this men's intensive. She's saying, please read this book by Lundy Bancroft. Please read this. I mean, really? You think she's... What's she doing here? She's probably right. Changing this mindset. I got one man, a real quick story, and I know we got to move on. This guy in Australia called me, and he gave me this idea. He says, I'm changing my life. I'm going to do whatever she says to do for a year. I'm going to do whatever she says. I'm going to trust her. It's racking my brains to do that, but I'm going to do that. Okay, moving forward. Number 8, attune. And attune stands for attend to her, tune into her, tolerate her distress, understand her, nurture her, and empathize with her. And I have them practice this. Just write attune on your forehead, write it on your palm. Okay, number 9, there is no I in us.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure, attune. A is attend to her. T is tune into her. A man came up with this, by the way. I didn't. Attend to her, tune into her, Tolerate her distress. It's okay. It's okay. It feels like a fire hose right now, but it's okay. You can do this. Tolerate her distress. Understand her. Seek to understand her. N is nurture her. Nurture her. And E is empathize with her. Okay, the last one is emotional connection comes by way of vulnerability. Sir, Mr. Narcissist, emotionally abusive man, crying and becoming broken is so attractive to her. Just be a broken man. She's going to love you. Maybe. All right. That is it. And Sharmen's going to give our wrap up.
Yes. In summary, if you consider that narcissism is the epitome of our brokenness by sin, it's arrogance, it's acting as if we are God and the world is here to serve us, then you recognize that all of us fall on that spectrum somewhere. The harder our hearts become, the stronger our narcissistic tendencies, and the less changeable they become. Because even though God is big enough to fix our hearts, He never forces anyone to choose Him. God is still bigger than every bit of our brokenness. He is. As a shepherd of God's people, no matter what your capacity, those victims need your voice to help them find their voice and to stand in the gap with them as they're trying to get out of this hole of abuse. Is it messy? Absolutely. But it represents a spiritual battle even more so than simply a relational one. God has a purpose for every single person He brings into your office, whether it's the abuser or the abused. And that is for you to shine the light of Christ all over it, somehow, some way, just to be a light. You don't have to have all the answers. Who does? But you do have to let the Holy Spirit speak through you. So we have just a few minutes to take questions. But before you go, I want to speak this benediction over you. Our prayer for you as you go from here to be a conduit of ministry to their hearts by God is that you may go, I'll put this up here, may you go in the strength of the power of the Holy Spirit within you to discern truth and to bring comfort and healing. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. All right, we've got some, I know people are going to be leaving. Yes, ma'am. Boy, real loud. Incredibly high correlation. I'll just have a quick answer. The question is Asperger's and emotional abuse and narcissism. I don't have any stats. The crossover is huge. Huge. So I would say my guess would be 70% of the men that I'm working with have some sense of Asperger's or on that spectrum in some way. It's absolutely huge. We don't, studies are going to come out. Yes, sir. Well, it's huge. The church has a huge opportunity. I mean, there's going to be questions here about will the church really open up its doors to this, to what Sharmen is saying? Will they let Sharmen in? Will they let me in? So, of course, the church is a great healing place, and if they can learn. So secondary abuse, how many have heard of secondary abuse? I mean, that's what happens when people go to counselors, clergymen, friends, or whoever, and they try to get a listening ear, and they don't. And so now we've got abuse on abuse, which is horribly damaging. But the churches, of course, we want to start speaking to churches, and we hope that they will open their doors to us. We're Christians. We're part of the church. Yeah, go ahead. Well, why don't we just take the first one? So, and then we'll get somebody else. Do you want to talk about demon?
Sure. Satan has a vested interest in making sure that this marriage never looks like God to the world. So yes, demon activity, I'm sure, is a huge part of it. Like I said, this is more of a spiritual battle than it is simply a relational one, because it's meant to be God to the world.
Take that one back there, and then you right there. Go ahead. Okay, so the question is, are we looking at other mental disorders that are, comorbidity and so on and so forth? Of course we do. Of course we're looking at, so we've got an evaluation process that we're looking at. It's a very good point. Absolutely, there are coexisting. We just mentioned Asperger's. There's other depression. There's other things. But these are characterological. When you look at somebody with a covert narcissist, this is an embedded characterological issue. So it isn't simply just an episode or idiosyncratic of a certain situation. It's really pervasive. So, okay, back there, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I promised her. Go ahead. Thank you. That's enough for right now. Next question. Sharmen is dealing with dozens upon dozens upon dozens and has become just an expert. I'll let her address this.
So the bottom line is, it is written on our hearts to be in relationship. But relationships are so broken, and yet it's written on our heart to be in relationships. So sometimes we get into these relationships and we can't allow ourselves to get out of them because there's such a strong attachment, even though it's full of abuse, right? So some of it is that, again, that is written on your heart to be in relationship. God created us for that. But trying to let go of...
we're getting, the average age is 35 to 65. Yep. They've been married for 20 years. They've got 3 kids together. They've got a house, a car, mortgage, and a life, and they love, and she loves him. But codependency, talk about coexisting issues. So codependency, poor boundaries, and he's a boundary buster. So there's so much work to be done. So we can keep going here. All right, now, yes, ma'am.
I just tell them it's bad behavior. It's disabling your ability to connect. It's devastating your relationship. Why do you want to keep doing that?
And I think I made this point. I'd like you all to think about this. What I'm finding with these men, so their thinking errors, the self-protection. I did this video, kind of a cool video, I think. Self-protection and narcissism as a means of defending against feeling healthy shame. I'd like you to play with that notion. Is that really part and parcel of what's going on? They just don't want to feel bad. And then the women are often accusatory and critical. I mean, they're upset. They're a can of Coca-Cola shaken up, and so they're critical, and so he's defended, and she's critical, and it's a mess. But consider that. Consider the notion that it's all a self-protection. Narcissism is self-protection, and it reinforces self. It reinforces, I'm the center of my world. I'm the only one in my world. It's only me. All right.
Oh, Lundy.
Right there, my book.
It was Lundy
Bancroft. Lundy Bancroft has been around forever. So Lundy did. Why does he do that? The voice of the angry man. So Lundy's work is seminal. It's wonderful, and it's horrific self-promotion. But my book just came out, which the subtitle is "Hope and Help for Women Dealing with Narcissism and Emotional Abuse." Leslie Vernick, obviously, her work is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Sir, what 2 types? Well, why don't we take the first part? So the interaction, like what do we do for treatment? So he raises a great point. It's not just... So here's my pet peeve. Women will call me up and say, I'm going to send my husband Joe to you. Please fix him. He's damaged. And when Joe comes to me, guess what he talks about? Her. So there's got to be some cooperation, and Sharmen and I are doing... It's a really cool thing that we're doing. So Sharmen's working with the women primarily. I work with some women. I'm working with the men primarily. I work with some women. And we're doing couples work when it's appropriate. And we're having the women always I have the women talk to me. I have them write out a lengthy thing, which they hate doing, called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, what it's like to live with him. Only when she feels safe to do so. So I got a 47-page one the other day. So, that's common. It's absolutely common. They're writing out 20 years worth of pain, and Sharmen helps them write it, and I need to know it because they don't want to talk about this stuff. And so, anyway, we're developing this, and come back next year. I hope they'll invite us back, and we'll tell you what else we're doing. Thank you for your whoops and hollers today, by the way. This is our resident,
local,
what do you call that? What's a
Pentecostal?
Oh my goodness, I'm getting more and more emails from women who are saying, look, our children are being impacted by this narcissism and emotional abuse. And I'm sad to tell you that I'm not doing much. I'll let Sharmen speak to this, but we will be doing more and more of that, more family therapy as it's appropriate. But of course, my goodness, 20 years of emotional abuse. When you have narcissism, you have emotional abuse, this craziness, and of course it impacts the children. So do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, actually I do work with several kids of the families that we're working with. But, I really take the approach that the same tools I use for a wife to heal from narcissism, she can help her kids along the way too. And one of the things that I tell them to tell their kids is, whatever it is they're feeling, they feel that way. It's usually anger or belligerence or just ugliness because they're angry and hurt and, just not feeling good. So I always tell them it's written on their heart that family is not supposed to look like this. That's why they feel the way they do. So it helps the kids normalize what they're feeling without just stuffing it. But also, then I say, but God is still in control. We have to keep our eyes on God. So it normalizes the feelings, but kind of gives them that step of faith to keep their eyes looking ahead and just, navigating this in a healthier way so that they don't just take on all the pain and suffering as well with no means of knowing how to handle it.
I get emails every week from a woman saying our children are starting to take after Dad. So, yeah, go ahead. We're just starting to do that. Come on up afterwards and talk to us. And there's just not much out there. And again, not to harp on this, what is out there is so negative. And I get emails every day saying you're the only one that offers any kind of hope. And we don't often offer blind hope. It is, like I said, there's hope if. And we'll help you walk through all the ifs. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I do have a video on what to do when she's done. Oh, but that's to the husband's perspective. You have to give her space to heal, to walk through the being done part. And, the only way I know to do that, again, is for her to take her heart and set it before God as the master healer. Because she can't force herself to have feelings of love for him. She can't force herself to trust him. In fact, trusting him doesn't make him trustworthy. So if she doesn't feel safety, doesn't trust him, she's not in that space, it doesn't do any good to move her again to reconciliation until she's had that chance to heal. So, it's gonna mean just giving her that space to work on this between her and God to get her healed where he wants her to be, because trying to force anything to happen, even if he's making changes, really doesn't do any good, because again, it's about inviting her back into the relationship.
So the hope, I hope we presented this at the hope, and we're experiencing success. That's why, I know that's not what the world is saying out there, but when she will take a stand, when there will be a breakdown, when she will separate for a season and get her head clear, develop good, healthy boundaries, and he will then, men don't want to be alone. Did y'all figure that out? I mean, we're little boys. We are just little boys, and we just cannot stand being alone. So, and I want that. I don't care what the motivation is. It can be external motivation at first. That's fine. Great. Give me a scared little boy. I'll take him. Okay, last question. And you guys are next to the last question. We'll give you a chance too. You guys are wonderful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I say that is a really good boundary for her to say. Sexual intimacy is a byproduct of a loving, safe, vulnerable, intimate environment. And he has not provided that, so there is no way that he should be allowed to demand his right in having sex with her.
Boy, that 1 Corinthians 7:14 or whatever, that has been so mangled and manipulated. Oh, my word. Okay. Last question.
They are on YouTube.
So they begin with narcissism, how do they come? Narcissistic and emotional abuse, what she wants him to know, or narcissism and emotional abuse. Anyway, you find my name and
Yeah, he has a channel, David, what's your middle initial?
It's a little embarrassing.
David Hawkins.
I just got addicted. I'm recovering.
Yes, it's the toolbox sign up. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.